This reading is, I think it's so much more beautiful. I was just listening to it again after reading it many times yesterday, and I thought, oh, I wish they just could have all been with me for the last 24 hours, because it's, I think, impossible in just a moment or hearing it for the first time to really feel the extraordinary nature of what Jesus and Master and Swamiji are all saying to us in this reading. We don't get to hear this reading very often. It's week 53. And very interestingly, the last time anybody spoke about this reading was 5 years ago. I looked this up when I had I just had the desire when I was giving this same service, so I called everybody and changed it because it was supposed to be week 52. Of course, it's just reserved for leap years. And nobody's given the service anywhere in Ananda again or talked about it. And I just feel like I want to move it and make it number 1 so that we get to hear about it more often. And then about a month ago, I decided this year I would do the same thing. But lo and behold, in ways that I don't understand, it's actually the reading for today. So I don't think this was a leap year, but somehow we got to 53, so everybody all over Ananda is talking about really the essence of this teaching is what is the difference between personal love and divine love. And Swamiji mentions in the reading, I just printed it out here, I mean, so many things, this line that he said, that the Christ, the divine consciousness, is not conscious of itself as separate from us. Meaning, that which we call divine, that from which everything is made manifest, doesn't hold that consciousness of separateness the way we do. We're looking at each other as separate individual beings, each with their own unique talents and pluses and minuses and different bodies. But this superconscious state of superconsciousness from which we all have been made manifest doesn't hold us that way. And Christ goes on to say, he loves us not only for, but as our very self. In other words, he's just loving us as part of himself. It's not for anything in particular we're doing. It's just part of all of what is, and all of what is that opens, that is the heart. It doesn't open a heart because it's not human, but it is the heart from which we're all made. So we are all, every single one of us, not only at our very core, but in the center of each cell, each atom, each smallest particle, is that pure essence of that which is divine. And as we work our way back in this life and many lives towards that very center of our being, we find that not only do we not get smaller, this is what this reading is saying from a human perspective, we can't really get this, but in fact, it is only from that very core that we can actually touch into that same exact core essence of everything in creation that really is all that is. So we actually go from being, as this beautiful song that the choir just sang, sometimes you just hear a certain phrase or a line, but it says, from earthly walls confining to soar in spirit skies, that we go from what we think is real in our little selves and our lives, earthly walls confining. We get to the very essence of everything. We touch it, not just in every one, but in every animal, in every rock. We see it in the ocean, we see it in the skies, we know it, and we go from being these little selves that think we're out there taking care of ourselves, watching out for everything, to part of this infinite whole in which no pain can come to us, no harm can come. It's made of that pure, loving consciousness. This morning after, let me just parenthetically say here, because I'm thinking to myself as I'm speaking, oh dear, this is so inadequate compared to the actual feeling of it all. These words just can't do it. Master himself said, I read this yesterday, it's a quote from him. He said, I can only speak to you of divine love by speaking about the effect it has on you, the way it affects your love. I cannot speak directly to you about it because it's not anything that can be known in that way. It is, we say this all the time, I know it, but it's such an experience, and then one knows it. And Master said that same thing. I'll keep explaining to you what it might look like in your life, but until then, you won't really know it. This morning, when I got up to meditate, I sat in front of my altar. All of the pictures of the masters are there, of course, and of Swamiji and of Jyotish Devi, and all of these objects that people have brought me from all around the world for many years. A little bead that's been carried into so many sacred places, any number of malas that have been carried with people through Italy, through India, and it just goes on and on. A little rock shaped like a heart that a dear friend found at the ocean one time, and all these things are there, and they've been there for a long time, most of them. And I just sat at the altar, and I suddenly found myself just weeping. And I'm saying it to you because that is the feeling beyond the words. I have been reading this reading over and over yesterday. Read it, meditate, and then you sit down, and everything that has come from that love, everything that has been sat in these sacred places where those masters sat, where they blessed these places just by being there, their feet, their hands, they prayed there, comes and it finds itself on my little altar, and the master's love is there. It just comes through all of that, not in any words, not in any of this many things that I've learned over all the years, not in my accomplishments. And Jesus says this too in this reading. He says, let me just find this. By this, he says, as I have loved you, that ye also love one another. By this shall all men know that ye are my disciples. Just saying, they're not going to know us by what we've accomplished in the world, that we were great devotees of the Lord, or that we were involved with God. They won't know us by the degrees we have, by what our bodies look like, by how much knowledge we've attained, by how much money we've made. That wouldn't tell anybody that we've loved God, that we've spent this whole life wanting to know Him, to be in His love. But if we love each other in that way, if we sit down at our altar and we feel those beads that have been held in God's hands virtually, that have traveled around to all these sacred places, that have come from the pure love of another seeker, and we're alive with that feeling and our heart opens, and the tears just come because the love is so alive. Then somebody feels the divine in us. Then they feel God when they're in our presence, not by all of these other things, but the ego that has this hold on us, that really works hard to have everything known in its image, not in the divine image, from the image of the earthly walls, holding on to it. It's such a trick. There's a wonderful story that many of you have heard before of Ananda Ma, who was just a wonderful, an avatar, really, a female Indian avatar who Master and Swamiji both spent time with. She died in the 1980s. So again, the stories that we hear about her, they're real. They're not hearsay. They haven't gone through thousands of years. They're written. The story's been written by many of her disciples. She used to do a lot of bhajan, a lot of singing, and she would go into these ecstatic states nightly, all the time. She lived in them, but she would start singing this music and very quickly be out of her body. And everybody around her knew, because her body itself would start to do things that are humanly impossible. Interestingly, nobody was ever afraid in her presence, even though it must have looked somewhat bizarre. But all they ever felt was love as this was going on. And her niece, who was visiting her, who was not a terribly spiritual young woman, was so drawn to her one night that she went up to her, and Anandamoy Ma just reached out and tapped her on her chest. And it was such a source of power that the niece went flying back. But there were hundreds, if not thousands, of people around Ma, as there always were. And nobody noticed until later that the niece was missing. And when they realized she was missing and they started looking for her, they found her literally buried deep in a huge mound of dirt. They had to extricate her from this. But as they got to her, they heard her just chanting, "Oh Hari," just singing the name of God in her own ecstatic state. And this went on and on for weeks and then months. And her family would try and communicate with her, but she was constantly in a state of pure divine ecstasy, having been touched by this great saint. And that the power of the heart of pure divine love communicated just took her beyond all human experience. And her family started begging Ma. They started saying, "We want her to be who she was before." And Ma just said, I'm not going to do that, in her own way. But they begged her and begged her. And finally, Ma said to them, "Great saints that you bow to, people like me, you come, you want to touch their feet. They have spent lifetimes of tapasya, doing the work they would need to do to get free, lifetimes to attain this state. And you're asking me to take her out of it?" And they said, "Yes, Ma, we can't be with her like this." This is the power of the ego. It's extraordinary. The ego cannot bear to be near anything that is foreign to itself. So pure divine love is not what the ego knows. Everything that is the ego is that which keeps us separate, that keeps us unto ourselves, that keeps us deciding, do we like this person? Do we love that person? Are we going to open our hearts to that person? We just live in a constant state of judgment. It's not always horrible judgment. It's the nature of the ego to keep us in this me and you place. And there they were, their own child, their sister, who had attained a state of pure ecstasy. And they begged until Anandamoy Ma did it. She brought her out of this state of ecstasy months later. It's a remarkable thing that we have to contend with as human beings. There's a story that I came across a few weeks ago that I looked at, and then yesterday I went back to the internet to look at it again. Maybe some of you know this story, I didn't, but of a father and a son team the son was born with cerebral palsy. And the doctors and all of the medical people kept telling the family, he has no potential. And their words were, he's going to be a vegetable. Put him in a home and forget about him. And something in the father just stayed very strong. He knew, he said, without a doubt, that he could not do this with his son, that he was not meant to do it with his son. And this was probably 50 or more years ago now when the son was born. I don't know the exact date. But the father eventually worked on a computer. I say 50 or more years ago because we all know the state of computers, and devised by himself a way for the son to begin to communicate, that he could work on the computer. He's in a wheelchair bound, he can't walk, he can't speak, he's quite spastic in his movements, but that he could start communicating. And they found out when he could communicate that inside of this body was this beautiful soul who was alive and well and bright and interested in all of the things that we're interested in. And somehow his father had the inspiration to get his son out and to start taking him out into the world by exercising with him. So he built a special bike, and his father became a runner. He was not a runner, and he would run pushing his son. And his son came home and said to him, when we're out there and running, I lose any sense of disability. He said, I feel normal. And his son, in his spastic way, whenever they would cross a finish line, they started racing. He'd be waving his arms. Then his father started doing more. And he worked his way up to doing triathlons with his son. He created a boat that he could swim with him on his back. And he made a bicycle with a huge basket that his son could sit in. They did the Ironman together. And they became this extraordinary voice for what's possible when a father develops, finds within himself unconditional love. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about divine love that is not conditioned by anything. We're talking about the way parents might look at a little 6-month-old or 2-year-old, usually, and to see just pure beauty, see the divine in them, in part because they are still close to God. But here is this man who's doing this at 73 with his 50-some-year-old son, is running the Boston Marathon. And why? Just to see this pure joy that his son experiences because of the father's love. So this is what's so interesting. I mean, the whole story is beautiful. I started relating to the father. I'm a little embarrassed to say, but not completely. I started thinking, oh, how beautiful to bring all this love to people, to be able to help people find pure joy. And, I had a whole trip about it. Then it crossed my mind as I started watching them I found YouTube videos. Shanti, you're not the father, you're the son. We all are. We're all disabled in some way. We all are struggling to find that core of perfection where everything is just exactly as it was meant to be. And God is taking us on bicycle rides and into the water and running with us. And he's saying, you're perfect as you are. Look what I'll do for you, just so you can know joy. Look at this. Look how much I love you. This is what I'm trying to show all of my children. This is what I'm trying to awaken in them. Then yesterday, this is so fascinating and beautiful to me, I find a story of a minister who shared this story. This is many years ago. I think it was 10, 12 years ago, with his church, and he showed the video. And what does the minister say in this article? He said, I always thought I was the father, but when I showed the video in church, I realized I was the son, that we're all the son. We're all being loved perfectly so that we can learn how to love. That's what human love is. That's what it is. It's a template for us. It's like a way that we can just follow a breadcrumb trail, if you will. We love. What does human love do? It teaches us how to love better and better. We want to treat those in our lives. If not our partners, our children. If not our parents when we're small, as they get older. We want to just love our friends, love our gurubais, those people who are on the same path that we are. We don't want to love them with just our little human love. We begin to understand, and we want to learn how to love them really apart from everything that is human. We want to learn how to love heart to heart, soul to soul, infinity to infinity. That's what we all want to do even before we know it. And so we start loving, we listen to talks, we watch YouTubes these days, we do everything we need to do till we begin to say, that's perfect love. That's what it is. Let me remember that. I had the tiniest little experience many, many years ago, decades ago now. I was traveling with a friend who was not as used to traveling as I was, and who also, I could feel, just needed things to be in a certain order. And I'm sort of much more, what are we doing tomorrow? And in those days particularly, oh, you want to go away for 3 weeks tomorrow? Sure, give me a few minutes to pack. It was like that. It was just easy for me. The night before we were finished with our trip, which was our last night, and I just sort of wanted to dive deep into the trip at that time, not this trip, but a lovely trip. But I looked at this person and I thought, what's going to free her from whatever holds her? And I said to her that night, would you like to pack and get completely ready so that everything's taken care of and then we can enjoy the evening? And she said to me, oh, that would be so wonderful. And then later, nearly really with tears in her eyes, such a simple thing, she said to me, I felt so well loved. Why do people feel that well loved about something so small? It really hit me because it wasn't about me. It was about seeing her absolutely outside of my egoic self, looking at her, who is this soul, heart to heart. What does she need right now? It's so much more special than most of us realize. It's challenging to get outside of ourselves, but that is what we are having. That's what we're doing here. That's what love is trying to teach us. You know, Asha said, I wrote them down. I wanted to repeat something that she said last week that was so beautiful to me. You know, the whole topic last week was I am the way, the truth, and the light. No one comes to the Father but through me. It was so beautiful. There's no way to get to truth, to get to light, to know pure love, except through the Father. And she presented that beautiful image for us. That song that was so gorgeous, if Jesus leads me through the shadow of the valley of death, I will fear no evil, basically, is really what the song was. Asha, if you didn't hear her sermon, please go back and listen. It was very beautiful. But it was just what can happen if we're willing and able, if we persevere, if we bring all of our energy towards in that case, transcending fear. But really, what does that all mean? What is transcending fear? It's finding love. So many of these contractive, these limiting qualities of ours, they cannot exist in the face of pure love, not pure, unconditional love. It knows no judgment, it knows no fear, it's heart wide open, it's you can be and do and accomplish anything and everything. Everything I am, you are too, and more, Jesus said. Those were real words. But, as Master said, and as Swamiji put in this reading, when I am gone, only love can take my place. And what does that mean? That means any pure manifestation of divine energy, Jesus Christ himself, everything I am, you are too, and more. Master, when I am gone, only love can take my place. Pure, unconditional, divine love. How else could an avatar exist? So if you want to find God again, Master was saying, find divine love. Do whatever you have to do to find your way back to that pure, soul-centered love. Maybe I'm not going to be able to find that. What Asha said, I don't have. There was a quote that I wanted, but I'm not going to. But let me just end with a couple of things. Every Sunday, there's no way around it. Asha quoted it last week too, because you can't talk about the way and the truth and the light, and you can't talk about divine love without hearing the words from the Bible and through Master that Swamiji rewrote when he said, greater can no love be than this, from a life of infinite joy and freedom in God. That's what that father said when he's on television now and on YouTube. I do this so that I can feel my son experiencing infinite joy and freedom. And if you watch the YouTube, you'll see it's true. It's pure joy from a life of infinite joy and freedom in God, willingly to embrace limitation, pain, and death for our salvation. Greater can no love be than this. All we need to do is say yes. Master says it again in God's boatman. He says, crossing a million scrags of suffering with bleeding feet. These are Master's words. I'll come 1 trillion times for you. What greater love could we want? He's saying, just do it. Look, right here. Just walk into my arms, and I will touch you like Ananda Ma touched her niece. All we need to do is say yes. In his book, The Secrets of Meditation, which is, Swamiji wrote these secrets books, 30 days to the secret of anything, 30 days packed of wisdom, of love, of success, this one's of meditation. He says, the secret of meditation is visualizing yourself seated at the heart of infinity, sending rays of divine love outward from your center to all of the universe. Isn't that beautiful? Visualizing yourself seated at the heart of infinity, sending rays of divine love. Those weren't just words from Swamiji. Just do it. We are here at an extraordinarily precious time. Many of us in this temple were born into a time of make love, not war, great music. I've talked about it before. We are either disciples of, or at least wanting to be in this temple, wanting to be near a man who came, who was called a Prem avatar. Prem is the Sanskrit word for love. He was an avatar of love, and we came here right now to be with him. Really, don't waste a life. Use your love. Use your life. Well, do what Swamiji said. Sit down. Do it now. Imagine ourselves seated, sending rays of love out to the universe. And then, what happens? Then we're just seated one Sunday morning in front of our altar, and we have no idea how we got there. It's only 70 years in this life, not actually a long time, and they're just tears of love pouring down our face. Our hearts are wide open. From what? From just sitting in meditation, doing what Swamiji, he's given us all the words, he's given us the visualization. That's all we need to do. At the end of her sermon last week, Asha was so moved, and you could just feel it. I mean, I feel it right now. And she was basically holding on to the hem of Jesus' robes, if you will. It was her friend's dress guiding her, but it doesn't matter. And then she looked up at us, and it's the same words. I want to say they just pierced my heart. Just receive him. Just hear what Jesus said to us, to them who would receive him. Everything I am, you are too, and more. Why would we trade in this tiny little fraction, a reflection of the essence of all of what we are and all of what we can have, that we would be in love endlessly into infinity every moment for a tiny little touch of some human love? It just would make no sense. Here we are. We're shown the way, we're shown the truth, we're shown the light. Just receive it.